Behind every success story, there is a long line of triumphs and defeats that remain hidden from others. These stories get condensed into journeys that minimize the struggle and wrap up with a happy ending. But we know that's not how life works. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about the challenges that Mark's guest faced and how they overcame adversity. Now, here is your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mark Azoulay, and I'm here with returning guest, Christina Dixon, to get a relationship update for both her and me. We're going to talk about essentially what it's like to be in a long-term partnership. We've each moved in with our partners. We're looking at kind of that next stage of marriage, kids, family building. And I don't know about you, Christina, but I am fucking terrified. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, I think terrified is a great word. Excited, all of the emotions in between that.
So on this episode, we'll chat both as humans and I think as therapists, right? Of how do you navigate some of these conversations? I'd be curious to know a little bit about what commitment means to you and how that shows up in the relationship, and what it's like to, just build long-term bonds. Because what I'm starting to realize is that, love is very different from lust, and then the honeymoon phase is over. And I'm definitely, I'm dating my girlfriend, but it's also we're kind of family. We live together. We moved out here to Evergreen, Colorado. It's a very different thing. And me personally, I haven't had a long-term relationship, right? I've had a long distance relationship that lasted a while, but that's not really a real relationship in some ways. But the longest person I dated before Caroline was a year or so. So this is all new territory for me.
Same for me. I'd had very few long-term relationships, but they were maybe a few months or a year or so. And to be in a place, Andrew and I have been together for a year and a half. And like you said, to be in that honeymoon, to move through that into now we're living together. Now we're talking about future steps. It's been a roller coaster.
Yeah. So can you say a little about that roller coaster? What's the current temperature?
Yeah, I think right now it's a bit challenging. I actually broke my foot a few weeks ago, broke a bone in my foot. So it's been a different type of dynamic for our relationship. So, we were kind of steady in some ways in regards to knowing what to expect of each other, knowing how to interact and how to talk with each other. And then all of a sudden I'm on crutches and not able to put weight on a foot. And we have a 2-story house that I have to figure out how to get up and down steps. It's my right foot. I can't drive. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I'm reliant on a person like I've never been before. And it's hard for me to ask for help. And so that has really thrown a wrench, probably in the long run, a positive wrench, but a wrench into the dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, that's real. We were talking a little before the show that, my partner went through shingles last year, and it was a very similar thing where all these old feelings came up, and she was truly dependent for a while. Mm-hmm. And I can step into this caregiver thing, but I built up a lot of resentment. I think I got really scared of just being oh my God, is this what relationships are? Is this the rest of my life? We had a wonderful first year of our relationship, and last year was good too, but first year was dating, and we were traveling a lot. I was camping a lot. We were all in the car every weekend. It was always something fun. And then this shingles thing happens, and it's oh God, I clear your calendar, right? I'm not going anywhere with her. There's a lot of stuff that I wanted to show her still in Colorado, things I wanted to do, and I was just kind of sitting in a lot of disappointment, which turned to anger. Where I felt I was trapped, and a lot of that was me, right? Yeah. I had this idea that I had to be around her all the time, where quite frankly, most of the time she was just kind of asleep. She wasn't even aware of me there. But yeah, it was crazy how I got thrown into that kind of martyr role. And I didn't like it, even though I felt stuck in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's super easy, especially if someone's a caregiver. Andrew's got the same tendencies. So he steps into the caregiving role super well. But I am afraid of, and I think there was some resentment. We've had conversations now about distribution of household tasks, who does more or who does what, and just a feeling of frustration of the trash never stops, the dishes never end, you're always having to take care of something around the house, and then add in like you, in a lot of ways, is taking care of me. It's a lot easier for him to get up and get me a glass of water than it is for me to try to figure out, especially at the beginning when I broke my foot. And I am not a good patient. I am not good at asking for help. I'm not good at saying, can you do this for me? And so he will then get angry at me because I'm pushing it. And he's like, you're going to hurt yourself even more. And this is going to go on longer. And that resentment, that anger will build up. But I just don't want to be dependent.
Yeah. That other side's tough too. Like I got COVID last year, and I'm a horrible patient. I'm so bad. Like I am both very dramatic because I use humor to cope. Right. So I will literally be on the ground and be like, I'm dying. I can't move. And I'm like being dramatic, and I'm trying to like make a joke out of it. But for someone that doesn't speak that language, they think that I'm like actually dying. Right. So like, that's like kind of weird. And then I also have like unbelievably high standards. So like, I didn't notice, I mean, I know I have high standards, but I didn't notice it when I was sick until I was sick with somebody else, where it's like, you know, and it's kind of shitty to admit, but like, you know, if Caroline brought me like, you know, Campbell's chicken soup, I would be like, what the fuck is this? Like, why didn't you make this from scratch? Like, you know, I want organic ingredients and like, you know, slow cooked broth. Like, what do you mean you just microwave some chicken soup for me? You know, like I have like unreasonable standards for how I want to be taken care of. And my problem is I don't often communicate those. So it ends up just being this thing where I'm like, well, I'm just going to take care of myself because, you know, I'm the best at it. And I don't want anyone else to like mess it up, but I can't because I'm sick. Right. So.
Right. And I think I'm a little bit similar. It's not necessarily the perfectionist, but it's the, I don't want to ask for somebody, or it's not going to be as fast as I want it to be, or the same way that I would do it. Like maybe it's the Campbell's soup, but it's like, well, it's in the wrong bowl, or it's you know, it's not quite the right temperature or something that would be wrong for me. So yeah. And I also think of it of like, well, if my partner wasn't there, then I would have to figure this stuff out on my own anyway. So why don't I just figure it out when he is there?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so complicated, so escalating in the way that like when I then get activated in some way, it influences him. He gets activated in some way, it influences me. And we're just kind of rolling down the hill, getting into a bigger snowball together.
Right. Just like peeing off each other nonstop. Right. And yeah, I mean, I think what I know about you, right, and we've talked about some of your previous episodes, is that you've really worked hard to be fiercely independent, right, and taken a lot of pride in like the ability to be independent, to have like awesome life skills, to like be a high functioning human. And then when that gets taken away, it's just like, holy shit. Right. Or when like you said, it's like, I can just do this myself. I know how to do this. I have to do this. But having that thing that I know you're proud of, and I'm also proud of, the same thing, like get taken away is, it's tough. It's really tough.
Right.
Yeah.
And it stirred up for me also a lot of feelings about my body. So I thought at one point in time, and we talked about it on a previous episode, but I thought I had repaired a relationship with my body.
Yeah.
And then my body is letting me down again, in my perspective. It's we're here all over again. And fears about the future, like you kind of mentioned, is this how it's always going to be? And I have this story that I'm always going to be the sick one in the relationship, or I'm going to be the one that's slower. Because right now I can't walk as fast as everyone else. So usually, you know, people are going ahead and then I'm catching up eventually. But like, oh, is this going to be me in 20 years where everybody else is racing ahead and I get there eventually? And so, you know, it's hard to then be an attentive partner when I'm in this really negative story about myself and my body and my independence.
Yeah. When the spiraling is happening and like, oh my God, like it's just going to be more of this and worse. Right.
Right.
I can relate. Like, I'll say I don't have a fear of death. I think I don't have a fear of death because I'm still young. I think it will come. I'm not like I've conquered that, but I do have a fear of aging, and I do have a fear of like disability and like inability. And I think it comes down to what you're saying of like, it's truly a fear of dependence, right? Or a fear of like weakness, you know? I mean, something that like I gained from my mindfulness meditation practice is like, you know, I think my soul and my spirit is like strong, but I really get frustrated when like my body can't do what my soul and spirit want it to do. Right. And there is that disconnection where I'm like, just fucking like lift that thing over your head. Like, what's wrong with you? You know, just walk faster. Like, just don't get tired. Like, I have that kind of, you know, like, because my soul and spirit are strong and they want to do everything. But sometimes I just hit physical limitations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been the hardest challenge, I think, for me in relationship is the dependence. I'm like we talked about, so often have I been single and I am fiercely independent. So that comes more naturally to me. And it's a bit of a protection. It keeps me a little isolated and separate from other people. You can't get so close to me if I'm independent and able to do everything on my own and don't ask for help. So to be in this journey with somebody and say it's we and us together versus me and you, is a real learning curve for me.
Dude, that's the hardest thing. I mean, I'll just close a little bit to our listeners. Like, this is literally what I'm talking about in my own therapy. So you're gonna get it live with Christina here. I'm in a process where it's so difficult, but necessary to like expand my sense of self to include another person, right? That's out of my control. Right. Like, I'm used to, and again, for good or for worse, like, I pride myself on the amount of control I can have over my life. But then now my sense of self includes Caroline. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm not in control of like 50% of my identity. That's insane. Right. That's insane to me.
And if your family expands to children, then you're going to lose even more control than you have right now.
I know. And they're like definitely dependent, right? Like, you know, a partner's dependent sometimes, but a kid, it's like they can't do shit for like a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like, that is hard. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. It's a big change of identity.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally struggle with that because it's like, you know, again, I pride myself on being on time and punctual and like having my life dialed in and like having my systems. And now there's another person there and their values are different than mine around some of these things. And it's like, oh shit. Like, for the first time in my life, I'm like late to stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I hate this. Right. Or for the first time, you know, or like I have to consider someone else's feelings when I make a decision, or, you know, I can't just be impulsive and like throw a bunch of camping gear in the back of the truck and go. Like, everything needs to be talked about and planned. And while it is in service of something greater, you know, family, kids, future, et cetera, I think I am going through a like mourning process because I really liked my single life. I mean, yes, I was lonely, like deeply lonely in some ways, but I also liked the control that I had over it, you know? Absolutely.
And I think too, as exciting as it is to be going through some of these challenges, to know that we can come out on the other side of it. In addition, like you said, mourning the single life, but mourning the honeymoon. I even said after I found out about the broken foot, I was like, you know, this would have been so different if this happened 3-4 months into the relationship. It would have been like showering with affection and care and tenderness, and it would have just felt so lovey-dovey. And I mean, probably there would have been a challenge, but I think it would have been much different than it is now. And this is reality.
Yeah, I think it would have been way different, right? Because it's like, you can't turn it off. I mean, it's sort of like moving in with someone. It's like, you can't turn off the relationship. So it's like in the beginning, right? It's like, you know, yes, you know, you can be present for each other and shower with affection and love. And then you can like just go home, right? And like, it's off, right? And like your partner can recover. You could like, you know, hobble around the house and make yourself soup, right? Like there's like time out of the camera, right? There's time that's not on stage, but it's like moving in, it's like, it's all there. You see everything, good, bad, and ugly, you know? Yeah, and the stories that get stirred up, I think, are clear too. Like when you talk about dependence, when you talk about considering someone else as an only child, I have a deep, you know, kind of internalized, I think, prejudice about being selfish and about always getting what I need, because that's the story of only children. And so the idea of that bumping against, how do I be considerate for somebody else? How do I navigate, this is important and I need to talk about this, versus this is being a little bit selfish, or even recognizing this isn't about the only child syndrome, but it feels like it internally. Say more about that. Like, are you trying to mitigate being selfish? Like, are you trying to never be perceived as that?
Correct. Yeah. Because I think I got that label thrown at me, whether it was appropriate or not. That was always the go-to injury in school. is, oh, well, you're an only child. You get everything you want and you're always, spoiled or whatnot. And so I think I worked very hard to try to prove that I wasn't that stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a relationship, it's then so confusing of how do I ask for what I need and how do I get what I need? And can I take that in as my partner being caring, or do I take that in as I'm asking for too much, I'm being too selfish?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to see where my connection is. I think in my family, and this is, I think, similar in some Jewish culture, of like every gift also comes with an insult, right?
Oh.
So it's like, okay, I'm going to buy you these new shoes because your current shoes look like shit, right? Or like, I'm going to like cook for you because you can't cook for yourself. Like there's this like kind of like infantilization of help. And I think that's where I get triggered around asking for help, is like, I don't want someone to help me because I don't want them to think that I can't do it by myself, that there's like something wrong with me, or that like I'm not able, or like not willing, or not, not willing to learn, not able to do it, whatever it is. Like it's like a dig on my ability that I like need help from somebody,
Yeah. And so how complicated then, if you don't want to accept maybe the soup because it implies that you can't make the soup on your own, but you also want the organic broth, all those things. So you have the high standards and expectations for the soup.
Yeah, because I'm like, I could not only can I make the soup, I'm going to make the best goddamn chicken noodle soup you've ever seen in your entire life. Like, it's that level of ego, really, right? Of like, I'll show you like how capable I am, right? Like this soup is going to be like 2 Michelin stars right now, and I don't have a leg, right? And I can't even walk.
Right. So the overcompensation just shows up. It's I'm going to prove that I can overcome this, and even in a way that's harmful for me ultimately. Yeah. And poor Andrew has to sit by and watch it happen, and then he gets his own feelings about it.
Yeah. So what do you do about that? I mean, let's put our therapist hat on a little bit, before we move to the break. Like in the perfect world, right? Like how would you navigate that difference?
Well, I think the saving grace for me has been I have been in therapy this time. So I am having a space every week to be able to talk about what's coming up for me, and to help when I'm getting regressed, bring me back into my adult self and be a bit more objective. So I think that's an important part for me, is to have that other space that I can get clarity on this and get perspective. And I think communication. For me, it's been how do I put these things into words so he has at least a sense of what's going on for me. It's not this mystery or this confusion for him, but I can say it's really hard for me to ask for help. And when I do that, this is what gets stirred up for me. I think it grounds the both of us.
Yeah, I think the communication is huge, right? Like that's what I've been trying to do with Caroline too. And just, knowing she's not a mind reader, I guess, and trying to at least vocalize my feelings, and not stuff it in, not assume that we're coming from the same page on things, right? Like we do share a ton of values, but there are some key ways that we see the world which are dramatically different. And that's become more and more apparent as we've been in a long-term relationship too. And I try to like vocalize some of that just so, I mean, I don't want to change her mind because she's got her view. I just want to make sure that I don't get kind of washed aside, or that I just, that I don't stand up for myself, I guess,
Well, it goes back to, I think, the we versus the you and me.
Yeah.
Is that when you're sharing your values and you're having a conversation about it, it becomes more of the we are doing this together versus you're doing it and Caroline's doing it separately.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Or I think in what I'm more comfortable relationship where it's like, I'm doing it to Caroline, where it's like, I'm in that kind of power position, right? Like I'm dictating the way that things go. And in some ways, like really boxing her out. Right. Because I'm just like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. And it's going to be great. And like, it is great, but it doesn't make room for like other points of being. Like other points of view, which is something that I've been learning in our relationship a lot.
Yeah. And I think that's why I'm personally so happy that we've been together for this amount of time and haven't moved forward into a relation or into a marriage or something. I was much more keen at the beginning of like, let's race through this. And it's helpful to have these kinds of experiences and helpful to know more about our values and our communication.
Yeah, I think that's great. So We're going to move to a first commercial break. When we come back, I want to hear more about the values, differences, and similarities. I have some of that in my relationship that I'd love to talk about. And just kind of like, how do I say this? Like what you see in a partner when you see more of them, right? Because like you said, it's like, it's seeing beyond just that dating frame, right? You see them at all points of the day. They see you at all points of the day. Like it's way more intimate, and also a lot like slower. And that's been a transition for me too, of seeing my partner all the time. So a lot more to talk about. For those listening, hang in there and we'll see you on the other side of the commercial break.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Where can you listen to some of the world's top life coaches ready to dish out success tips and entrepreneurial guidance? The Voice America Empowerment Channel will do just that. Whether it's personal growth, building a better business, or inspirational life stories, make it a daily habit to tune into our programs. From weight loss and personal branding to law of attraction and increased happiness, you'll find it every day at voiceamericaempowerment.com. The Voice America Empowerment Channel. It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Christina Dixon, returning fan favorite guest, and we're talking about long-term relationships. So I think to frame this next segment, something that one of my therapists told me that really stuck with me is that when dating, you want to find 60% overlap of values, interests, likes, attractiveness, whatever, and then build the other 40. Right. And like building that 40 is actually the most important part. And that's what's really critical for me, because I was trying to find, well, one, I was dating people that weren't a great match. But I was also trying to find that 100% person. Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, there's a person out there that like, I don't have to work. I don't have to build. It's just going to be natural. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be perfect. And that like 60-40 thing really helped me. So I'm curious for you, Christina, does that ring true for your experience? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'd never heard it put that way, but it makes a ton of sense. I think when I was on the dating apps, for instance, I was looking for at least 90 to 100% in the value similarities. And I think I had this fantasy that things were going to be easier, or that they were just going to fall into place. It was that story of you see the person across the room, you just know instantly that that's your person, and everything goes smooth from there. And yeah, it does take work, certainly. And it does take conversations again about what are our similarities? What are our differences? What do we want to build towards? And what are we okay with having look different?
Yeah, exactly. And like, where do we overlap and where do we not? Right. Like, and are we okay not overlapping? But yeah,
Andrew's a huge extrovert and I am very introverted. So that's one of the things that we're never going to overlap over. And we've talked about how there's benefits. I slow him down a little bit. I encourage him to stay at home and take a day of rest, but he also pulls me out. And so we can move a little bit in each other's directions, but there are also times at the beginning I was more inclined to say, oh yes, to every invitation. And now I'm like, no, you need to do this. I'm going to stay at home. I'm not leaving the house. I need to binge watch TV or something. And I'm going to do this all weekend and you have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a benefit to a relationship is that if that's talked about, that can be okay. Right. Like, and it sounds obvious when you say it, but I've had so many clients that struggle with literally that issue where, jealousy can creep up or insecurity can creep up or, loneliness can creep up because it's never really talked about. It's like, oh yeah, we're just different people and it's okay that we have different, social speeds, right? And social needs.
And it does feel different for me when I was single, staying at home versus when I have a partner and I'm staying at home. Like there is a bit of, sometimes there's excitement of like, yes, I have the house to myself and all, but there's a bit of loneliness or sadness if I'm accustomed to having him around. I like having him in the house. And so it does feel a little empty when he's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. It can, and also because there's like a very clear alternative, right? It's like, oh, I could be doing this with him. Right. Whereas when you're home alone, it's like, yeah, I'm choosing this. And it's just what my life is,
So I think for me, it's finding that how to take care of myself and be a part of the relationship. Sometimes I'm going to need something that looks different. Sometimes I need to push that aside maybe and say, oh, this is an important thing or it's meaningful to him and I need to show up even if I'm not feeling 100% for it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I guess I'm more extroverted than my partner. But I love having people at our house. I like hosting and like being the community hub. Like that's where my happy place. Like I don't have to go out that much, but I bring people into my space a ton. And I think that's been an adjustment for Caroline because I think she enjoys it, but never really had a space where she did that.
Right.
And it's like a different thing of like, because I've done a lot of that. I'm like, people be happy or not, they'll figure it out. Like it's very casual. Whereas I think because she's newer, there's this idea of like, she's responsible for everybody's happiness. She has to like take care of the whole party. She has to make sure that everything is fine. That's like unbelievably stressful. Like if that's how I felt, I wouldn't want to have people in my house, right? I'd be like, get out of here. Like, oh, it's always a bad time. That's kind of on them, like I'm going to do my best and make sure everyone's got something to eat and we have fun shit to do. But I'm not trying to, be the life of the party and the host and all that.
And Andrew likes to host as well, and it's fine on a regular day, but things like Thanksgiving, he will go over the top. He does want it to be this host and everybody's having a great time. And then at the end of the day, he doesn't enjoy himself.
Yeah.
So, trying to, again, support him in wanting that, but also reminding him, I don't think you want to do that every single holiday because you get really exhausted and maybe even a little frustrated that you're in the kitchen not enjoying it. So, just trying to put those things out there when he talks about the next party he's planning on hosting.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of on the other topic, right? Like seeing more of your partner, right? It's like you're seeing more of that from him and seeing that that's a pattern. That's been something that has come up in our relationship where, for me, having just like Caroline as a mirror for me is pretty intense because I just kind of operate in my own like quirks and my own buzz, but to really like have that ping off someone else is a learning experience for sure,
Right. And so she's able to see you, but also is impacted by you.
Right.
So, when Andrew is hosting and a bit stressed out, I can feel it. And therefore it's influencing my experience of it too. And so, then I think there's a pinging back and forth.
Yeah. Like that's the part where I'm like, oh God, I need to do more therapy or more work. Right. Because and maybe Andrew has this too. I don't know, but I have a thing where like, especially when I'm stressed or when I'm overwhelmed, I don't collapse, which is good. I've worked hard on to collapse, but I do go into like Terminator action mode where like I cut everybody off, including my partner. I go hyper focused and I just like task and like get things done. And I'm like in like the zone. And while it is effective, it is very isolating for my partner because she wants to help or she wants to be involved or she just wants to like hear from me, right? She wants to like listen and like know like how I'm feeling. And I'm just like, nope, this is irrelevant. Like, I just need to just do it. And I'm going to come out of this like fugue state in like 2 hours, And when I was single, like that, I was fine. I didn't even know that was a thing because I didn't have somebody to ping off of. I wasn't considerate of anyone else's emotional needs because there wasn't anybody else there,
Yeah. And that reminds me a little bit of my parents, actually. My dad was a little bit of, he would go kind of into a tunnel, and my mom would express frustration of, I don't basically hear from him until he's got it resolved. And then he comes out on the other side and he's in a much better mood. And there's not that opportunity for the partner to go through that journey and to experience it. It's kind of at least for my mother, it was jarring.
Yeah. So I learned that about myself, that I think it's very jarring for Caroline too. I didn't really know I had that because I didn't have that mirror. Yeah. Are there patterns of yours that are getting highlighted?
Yes. I was going to say for Andrew and I, it's Andrew's a big dreamer. And so he'll talk about things, but doesn't go into action. I am very action, like check things off a list. I've always had kind of the nickname of like checklist lady or something like that. That like I'm very driven, and so it frustrates both of us. That we early in the relationship we're able to get a phrase of he would say, "This is a dream item, not an action item," and then for me it was like, okay, cool. I don't have to think much of this. We can play in Fantasyland all you want, but he has so many interests that he'll talk about and not take action on that just frustrates me. And then he gets frustrated that I'm always like, well, I'm doing, or you're doing, or did you do? And it's like, can't I just take a break and not get something done today?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, Caroline told me a couple months ago, she was like, my whole life can't just be a checklist. And I'm like, what do you mean? That's what life is about. Is you check stuff off the list. And then the rewards, you get to put more stuff on the list, and then you check that stuff off the list, and then you get to put more stuff on the list, and then you just keep checking forever. But similarly, right? And I think it's gotten in the way of me connecting with her because she is also a dreamer, and she'll dream and want to like play with these ideas, and I can't enjoy the ideas because my first step is like, okay, but how do we actually make that happen? Like this is cool, but like I'm already in the planning mode. And I'm already seeing like the dollar signs, cha-chinging in my brain. I'm already seeing like the time off of work. I'm thinking of like a vacation or something, right? Like I'm already seeing like, okay, I need to like, if I want to do this, I need to devote like 20 hours of research to this so that I feel prepared and that like we know what we're doing, right? Like I'm like already creating the project management plan. When she's like, oh, like, wouldn't it be cool to go to Peru? And she wants me to be like, yeah, Peru's awesome,
Right. And
I'm like, how do we go to Peru?
Well, and it's tricky because Andrew's talked about Hawaii. He's wanted to go there for a long while. He keeps mentioning that that's an interest of his. And so I'm like, okay, let's make that happen. So we're actually traveling in a few months. Nice. But it is that like, how do I determine that that's one that we're taking action on versus that's just a dream item. Let's fantasize and play around with the idea of Peru. But then I think what works well for us is he's leaning into my strengths. So we've decided how long we're going to go. I booked the flight. I booked the hotel. I've got ideas of activities that we can do. He said, I don't want to do activities every day. Can we do a beach day kind of in between? Like, perfect. So he's weighing in, but he's also happy to step aside and say, you actually make this happen. I'll enjoy it when we get there.
Yeah, that's the thing. Are you also a Capricorn? You are, right?
No, I'm an Aries.
You're an Aries. Okay. Yeah. Caroline's an Aries. I'm in Capricorn. Yeah. I see that as like a tradition, like a Capricorn thing of like just planning. But it's the same thing, right? I mean, like we have an inside joke where it's like, we'll be planning a trip and I'll be like, okay. And the trip's like, 6 months away. And I'll be like, how are you going to feel on like the third day of the trip? Like, do you think you're going to want to do like a hike on that day? And it's like, what do you mean? Like, how am I supposed to tell you, like, well, my energy level is going to be, 6 months from now. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think I know about that. I mean, and I could be wrong, but like, I just have this, like, I'm playing out the future all the time, and trying to build this thing. And I think she gets frustrated when I'm trying to like do that because she's a much more like in the moment, flexible person,
And I so want to learn that. We've talked, Andrew and I, about we tend to be a little more on the extremes. And so our hope is in our relationship together, we move a little towards the center. And never to assume that I'm going to be exactly like him or that I'm going to be in a place where, yeah, I can totally be in the moment. But if I can move towards the moment and he can move a little bit more towards planning, I think we're going to be greater people down the road.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the same thing. Like, I mean, Caroline does help to slow me down. She helps me to appreciate the beauty, right? Like, we do a lot of nature stuff. So it's like, I love kind of what you said with Andrew. It's like, I'll be out there, I'll plan it, I'll get the road, I'll make the hikes. But like, she's the one that stops me and says, "Hey, like, look at this sunset." And I'm like, "Oh shit, that's pretty cool." Or like I'll miss all that because I'm just like executing the program.
Right.
Like I won't appreciate it. And she lights up and she's great to drive around with because she'll light up and she'll like tear up when she sees something beautiful and she'll like highlight it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually what this trip is supposed to be about. It's not just like, can Mark Azulay do the plan he said he was going to do, which is, I think, what my enjoyment is,
Right.
Like, oh, I did all this stuff. I
checking
checked
that
off
the list.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which I think is a fun reason why opposites can be together is, we can build on each other's strengths. We can learn a little bit. We can bring different perspectives because we've both said, Andrew's talked about dating people similar to him. And he's like, those relationships never work. And I can't imagine being with someone more like me. I think I'd be so stressed out all the time.
Yeah. I don't think I could do it. I think it would be, I mean, I've been in those and those have been nothing but power struggles because we're both trying to like control and plan and like dominate and like have it our way. Whereas I think, the complementary roles is very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it makes me a bit excited about the possibilities in the future that, we can move towards that and who knows what things are going to be like years down the road.
Yeah. So I should ask you this question. And I think it's an interesting question that I see come by my men's groups a lot. I think a lot of our generation is dealing with this as we're kind of going into like the adult role, which is the question of roles, right? Like, how does our generation deal with like gender roles, right? Or how's or deal with like professional roles, deal with the house chores, right? And I think it's not strictly man and woman, but I have found that having roles, or at the very least having like territories, is helpful, even though that's so counter to how I was raised as an East Coast millennial of like, everything should be equal, everything should be fair, everything should be the same. I found myself like really toeing into the role side of things. Like, does that make sense?
It does. I think there's another way of, I've heard some relationship people talk about it, that it's not equal, but it's how do we play into our strengths?
Yeah.
So I like hand washing dishes. Andrew hates it. So, or I don't want to say I like it, but I don't mind it. So I hand wash dishes. And that's something that I do all the time. He basically never does it. And for the most part, that's okay because it's something that doesn't bother me. It really does bother him. So why not lean into that? We also then outsourced. Neither one of us love cleaning. So we've hired someone to come in and clean the house. We have that privilege. But that eases a lot for the both of us because that would be a struggle and that would be a constant fight and negotiation.
That's a big one. Yeah. The every other week cleaning person is critical. Beats a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that saves our relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think with Carolyn and I, on the role front, like we find ourselves settling into some of the gender roles of like, as the male, like I'm initiating, I'm doing a lot of the planning, I'm like building the structure. And then she brings the beauty and the enjoyment and like the actual like depth to it. I know that was something for her that brought up a lot of insecurity in the past where she was like, I want to be the one doing these things too, but she doesn't really like it, right? Or it doesn't come naturally to her. And then I'm such a control freak that I think it's never good enough. So we're trying to settle into like these different ways of being, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It is. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of fun in relationships, but there is some work. Some people balk at the idea that relationships shouldn't be hard, but I think that there's maybe not hard, but work.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great segue as we go into our final commercial break here. I think when we come back, we'll talk about some of the end goal, the beauty stuff, right? Like the positive side of like what we're building towards, and how a listener might do some of that work overtly. I think we'll kind of put on our therapist hats for a minute and just talk about like what that work could look like and how to frame it in a positive way. So thanks so much for tuning in. Hang on in there, and we'll see you on the other side of the commercial break.
Follow us on Twitter at VoiceAmericaTRN. Get the lowdown on guests, new shows, and your favorites. That's VoiceAmericaTRN.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Voice America programs are now available on your favorite connected device, including Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home. Through streams with Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, listening to your favorite show is as easy as saying the show name followed by the word podcast.
Hey, Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast.
If that doesn't work, try adding on TuneIn or on iHeartRadio or on Apple Podcasts.
Are you ready to move to your next level? Listen for Empowering Women, Transforming Lives with host Rebecca Hall-Greider. Each show will focus on a central topic with discussion, guests, and your questions being featured. Our show is perfect for women who feel a call in their heart to step out in a bigger, more powerful way in their life and just need some encouragement, inspiration, and practical steps to support them on their journey. Empowering Women, Transforming Lives can be heard live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, with a replay of the show Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time and 4 p.m. Eastern on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Get the news on our shows and other happenings by following us on Twitter. Find us at VoiceAmericaTRN or twitter.com/VoiceAmericaTRN.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to the show. In this final segment, we like talking directly to the listeners, and we're going to chat about ways to do that 40% of work in the relationship. But first, I think is we're talking about the end goal, right? I mean, there are struggles, but the end goal kind of has to be worth it, and betraying some of my pro-kid bias here. But for me, it's children, it's family, it's commitment. Like I take commitment very seriously. It's something that, as an addict, I didn't take seriously. So now I'm kind of like my vows and commitments and promises are like maybe my prime value is dependability. And this idea of, frankly, going through like the human process of being a parent. Like I feel like there's like a real developmental step there that I'm afraid of missing out on. I'm afraid of not having that very like critical human experience. So I wonder for Christina, does any of that relate with you, or what's your version of kind of the goal? Like what are we working towards building?
I certainly agree with commitment. For me, there's a strong importance on marriage, and I don't quite know why. Yeah. Because intellectually, I can look at it and say, we own a house together, we're living together, we're committed in this relationship, we don't have any expectations of leaving. What difference does it make to me whether there's a piece of paper or a ring? And yet it's important for me. So I've done a lot of this, trying to understand myself, to know what is it about that institution that feels important, and why do I think that that's going to be something that secures the relationship instead of the actual commitment.
Yeah. What did you come up with? I'm curious. Like, what's the importance of marriage to you?
I'm still kind of working on it.
Yeah.
I think there's a fallacy in my mind that a marriage is you're locked in, you're in it, you're fully committed. And I understand that so many people get divorced, and my parents got divorced after being married for over 25 years. So it's not like something that I haven't experienced, but for some reason in my head, it's like, oh, if that marriage happens, then we are serious and we are in it forever.
So it's like a security thing, or it's like a milestone. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's an important milestone. And I don't particularly like that idea because, again, I imagine myself as fulfilled in the relationship now as I would be if there's a marriage. And I still want to move towards it.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, I don't know. Like, I joke with Caroline. I don't know if she thinks I'm funny, but I think I'm hilarious. And sometimes that's all that matters. But I've said, like, we bought this house and we're locked in. I mean, we're like bonded by like the matrimony of debt, and like by like the greatest connector in all of American society. But for me, the wedding is important. I didn't think it would be as important until I really met her, and until, I think maybe the work I put into building my community, where it's like, I want it to be both a community celebration. Like, it's important that I'm like at a place where all my friends and family celebrate me. Like, that's just a new thing for me. Like, I don't even like birthdays, but I think I'm going to love my wedding. And I think, like, as an expression of us, right? Like, down to like what the food is, like what the venue is, like even what the format is. We're looking at doing like kind of like a week-long thing. Like, just kind of as like a moment of self-expression and artistry, right? Like, my fear of a wedding is doing, and of course, no offense to anyone who's done this, but like kind of like the traditional like country club, you get like a steak, a fish, and a chicken, right? Like, you listen to the same like, top 40s hits, and then like the wedding's over. I've been to so many like that. And for me, that seems like kind of rote. Whereas I really want to like, I mean, I might be a bridezilla, but like, I want to like, or groomzilla, I guess. But yeah, I might want to like, really design the ceremony. I want it to be meaningful. I don't want to just like repeat stuff that I don't care about, right? Like, I want to have like awesome food is so important to me. It's like maybe the most important thing in my entire life. I want to have like incredible food, right? That like really represents us, right? I want to have like tons of dancing. We're looking at doing something like in nature outside, right? Like, it's just kind of as a way to like express who we are. Like, that's really exciting for me. It's really exciting for me. Like, it's like an art project,
I really like that framework. I really like that idea. I hadn't thought of it as an expression of the two people as a couple, and as, like an identity almost of really solidifying that. But I like that view.
Yeah, that's what's excited me about the wedding. To the point is like, fingers crossed, we're going to be trying for kids end of the year. Caroline doesn't want to be married before then, so I'll probably do like a small ceremony at the house, and then probably in 2 years or so do like a big wedding. Because again, I have high standards. I don't want to compromise. And like all the venues are full now because everyone's doing their COVID weddings or their COVID wedding parties or things like that. So I hate being rushed, and I want to do it right. So that's the current plan for you and the listeners out there that are following along with my relationship development. That's where we're at.
But I like that flexibility that you're talking about, that it doesn't have to be a certain way. It doesn't have to be, okay, we have to do this in a timeline before something else. We can do a different ceremony, but we can also have the big party and the big expression when it fits more for us and when we have the time for it.
Exactly. Yeah, when we have the time, when we have the money, when like we can do it right. Because it is important, and I don't want it to be something that I hate being rushed. I just hate that feeling, because I'm a planner, right? Like, I'm already living 5 years in the future, so I don't want that. Yeah, you
gotta have a short-term plan, a long-term plan.
That's right. So from a therapist perspective, right? Like, what are some ways that people could work on their relationships. I think specifically targeting and speaking to people in our category, kind of like premarital therapy, right? Like you're in there for long term, you want to work. What would you recommend people do or talk about or work through in preparing for this next step?
What was important for me was to know what my absolute red flags were and to be open to some yellow flags. And the way that I look at yellow flags is I need more information. It's not clear it's a green flag or a red flag. It's uncertain, or, maybe I need to understand it better. And I think, like you were talking about, when I was looking for people with the 90 or 100% values, I was looking for all the green flags, no red, no yellow. Like, we just have to hit it off. And to understand, there are some non-negotiables for me, but there are other things that maybe I can tolerate living with, or that I can grow to understand, or maybe I can be a better person because of. So I think that own clarity within myself, but also a willingness to have a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's big. And like, I think, knowing your red flags, doubling down on them, but then letting other things slide, right? Like, I'm a nerd, right? So like, for me, I was anti-sports, against all that kind of stuff. And like, America's like, I would never date someone who's into sports. Caroline loves baseball, and she loves the Mets, which is like, I've heard is like a fucking tough team to like. And I'm like, okay, like it's growing for me. It's like, I had to like learn how to be with like a sports fan, right? Whereas like my younger self would be like, absolutely not. Like, that is insane. But that's not really a red flag, right? The red flags are a little bit deeper of like, I don't want someone that like belittles me, or that's mean to me, or mocks me, or, yells. Like, those things are way more important than like what her preference of sports team is,
But I think it's really easy to think about those things. I imagine myself with someone who isn't into sports. And so, gosh, if she's got on her profile, or, first or second date, we talk about the Mets, well, it's easy to kick that to the curb. And instead, you're like, okay, we can be different in this way. Maybe you can even grow to understand a little bit about the Mets, or how hard it is to be a Mets fan.
No.
No.
But
that's her territory.
Right. You're right. Yeah, like, I can have compassion and understand that thing. Yeah, but sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
No, but I think that was part of the growth for me, is to figure out again, like, how can, what are the things that it came up for me very soon in my dating of, I do want to get married. I do not want necessarily to have kids. So that was something that was a discussion point very early on. But the stuff about, sports teams or going out more often or not, those are things that I can work around.
Yeah. And I think like those conversations you highlight are critical of like, are you on the same page about children? Are you on the same page about money? Are you on the same place about like standard of living? Are you on the same page about where you'd like to live? Like, are you city versus country people? Like, those more adult conversations, I think they are truly deal breakers, and they have to be talked about up front,
I heard someone once say that they'd been married for like 5 years before they even talked about their political affiliation. And I thought that is so interesting, is that you didn't even know where your partner landed on that until you were very far into your marriage. And then that was something that they disagreed on. It may not have been a huge thing because they didn't talk about it earlier, but I at least want to know a little bit about values, or about political beliefs, or about perspectives in the world around us that are important to me.
Yeah, I think that's critical. So something that is a good resource that I give to my clients, and I'm in no way sponsored by this. There's a thing called the Intimacy Deck. I think the company's Best Self. You can just Google it or put on Amazon. It's like $25 or something, and it's just like 200 cards that are just questions about all this stuff that we're talking about your past, about your beliefs, about your values, about your sexual likes and dislikes, about like your dreams, all this stuff. And I would recommend to anyone that's getting a long-term relationship, like, buy that deck of cards. It's super cheap, and it will save you so much hassle moving forward of just prompting you to ask these questions and start to like cover some territory. And I've also worked with some guys. Oh, good. Yeah.
Well, I would just add to that too, take it slow.
Yeah.
It doesn't all have to be in the first 3 dates that you go through all those cards and talk about all those topics.
That's true.
You can do it over time.
Yeah, you don't have to interrogate the person.
Right. That might be a bit of a turnoff.
Yeah. And kind of what I was going to say there is that, like, also, if you have cold feet, doing something like that can be helpful because it is really comprehensive. Like to just, if you're one of those people to look underneath every rock, that's a way to do it.
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah. So we're just about at time here. Christina, can you say a little bit more about you, where people can find you online?
Sure. I've got a practice in Los Angeles, and I have a website, cdixoncounseling.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. I'm sure you'll be back on the show pretty soon here. For those tuning in, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next week on another episode of From the Ashes.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azoulay on From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Meet triumph and defeat and treat those two imposters the same.